your number one marketing tool in private practice is going to be your website. And if you don't have a good website, it's going to be very difficult for people to find you and to know about you as a therapist. Brighter Visions is the premier web design and branding company for therapists. In fact, that's all they do is work with therapists to help you build and design your brand and also your website so that it represents who you are. They will sit down with you and go over what you want and help you design the perfect website that's unique to you. So go check them out today. You can do that by going to practiceoftherapy.com/brightervision and let them know you talked to Gordon, and you'll get 1 month free. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 75 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer, and I'm so glad you are with us today for this episode of the podcast. If this is the first time you're listening to the podcast, welcome, and take time to go and subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And also leave us a review. I'd love getting reviews from people and honest feedback. Today's episode I'm so excited for. It's a repeat guest, and I think once you listen to this guest, you'll know why I like him so much and why I enjoy having him on the podcast. So Jeff Geunther is joining us again today for this episode and talking about his podcast that has been recently released. That's by the title of Tell Me More About That. And in this podcast, he's going to tell you a little bit more about that and kind of what he's doing with that. So we'll get to that here in a minute. It's springtime here, and so if my voice sounds a little gravelly or whatever, the pollen is just killing me. So I apologize for that. So I might have to take a sip of water or two here as we go. But, one of the things, again, you've heard this from me a lot here in the last few episodes, and I apologize that it has just been so slow coming, but I'm down to just the last few lessons of getting it all posted and recorded of the Money Matters in Private Practice course. The majority of the content is up there and available to people, and so still take advantage of this pre-launch phase. It's been going on forever, and I apologize for that. But while I made the commitment that while it's in this pre-launch phase, you're going to get it at half price, and you can just use the coupon code TAKE50, TAKE50, and you can find that at practiceoftherapy.com/finance course. And it's up there for you. And take a look at that. I think it's going to be so helpful to people in just really getting your head around the financial side of private practice. And, and the other course that I've got out there, I haven't mentioned it much lately, but I've been getting a lot of emails about it here lately. Ugh, tongue's getting tied. A lot of emails here lately about the G Suite for Therapists course. And in that course, I show you how to use the tools of Google G Suite to manage your private practice. And it's really ideal for those practices that maybe are a little smaller. Maybe they're not quite to the point where they're taking insurance, but they need to have the tools to run maybe a part-time practice or maybe just a smaller practice, solo practice. Certainly as you grow, one of the things that you'll find out is that you do need to automate more. And G Suite has the tools to do that. And the other thing about G Suite, Google G Suite, for those of you that might not be familiar with what I'm talking about, if you have a Google account, you've got access to the tools of G Suite. But if you purchase get the paid version of G Suite, what most people don't realize is that when you do that, you can make it HIPAA secure and HIPAA compliant. and Google will provide you with that BAA, that Business Associate Agreement, that we need to just kind of show that we are keeping things secure. So you can store records on your Google Drive if you have the paid version. It also, the thing about Google G Suite is if you have the paid version of G Suite, you can also use your website for your email. So for example, if you ever get an email from me, it's Gordon@practiceoftherapy.com or lgordonbrewer@kingsportcounseling.com. And all of that's done through G Suite. I'm able to use my website URLs for that. So, but anyway, the course walks you through all that and talks about all the different tools of G Suite. And so I would commend that to you as well. And again, you can get to that at practiceoftherapy.com/G Suite course. And take a look at that. It's been up there for a while. I might be doing some updates to it. I'll be adding some more material to it, but whenever you subscribe to that or enroll in that course, you get, and this is true for both courses, you get lifetime use. As long as I've got it available, you get access to it, and you can go back and take your time at doing those courses and going through them. So that's just the way I like to do it, is make it available to people. So check those out. So now that I've said all that, I want to introduce to you again Jeff Geunther. And Jeff has recently done a guest blog on the Practice of Therapy website and the blog. And in that, he was talking about how to, in the blog post, and there's a video there as well, just tells people how to write their directory profiles for things like if you've got a Psychology Today directory or Therapy Den, which is Jeff's company, or Good Therapy, or any of those. But Jeff it's like a 50-minute video where Jeff teaches you how to write those profiles so that you'll attract more clients. So it's a great resource. But what I'm really excited about is Jeff's new podcast. And the title of the podcast is Tell Me More About That. And in the podcast, he actually interviews clients or people that are going to therapy and asks them about their impression of therapists and what we can learn from our clients on the other side about how to run our practices. So I'm excited for Jeff to be with me in this episode. So without further ado, here is Jeff Geunther. Hello, folks, and welcome again to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I'm so thrilled to have back with me Jeff Geunther. And I'm such a big fan of Jeff. I just love everything that he's doing. And he really does have the heart of a therapist. And I'm particularly impressed with Therapy Den that he started. And he's recently started a new podcast. And it's so exciting and a must listen to for any therapist or any of us in this space. So, Jeff, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be back as well.
Yeah. So, well, tell folks that don't know about you a little bit about yourself and a little bit of your story, and then tell us too about the podcast. It's really exciting. I was just listening to his first episode before we started recording, and I just love it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I grew up in California, and then I eventually moved to Portland, where I became a therapist. And in Portland, I started a local mental health directory that grew and grew and grew, and is the number one way that lots of people in Portland find a therapist. And from all the information and data I collected from that, I decided to launch a national therapist directory to go up against some of the big guys like Psychology Today and Good Therapy. It's a little different than those therapist directories because it has a mission to fight racism and homophobia and transphobia and any discrimination or hate. So
Right.
that's a big part of our mandate. And there's a lot of filters on the therapist on therapyden.com that allow, actually, I counted them up. There's over 140 search filters.
Wow.
Yeah, which is a lot. And so it's kind of a challenge to figure out, like, how can we put this many search filters in this therapist directory, but not make it overwhelming for clients that are going in there and trying to find a therapist. So I think we did pretty good.
Yeah.
But some of the search filters are like more progressive and modern based on what clients are really looking for. So, clients can go on there and find a therapist that specializes or especially trained in like health at any size, or a therapist that is, queer or trans competent, or has a racial justice framework, or just a therapist that's specializing in anxiety, depression, or relationship issues, the
Right.
classics.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So from creating that, a lot of influence that I've had in creating the therapy den is by asking actual clients what's important to them and what are they looking for, and what are the specific things that would make them actually like reach out to a therapist. And so I've done just like a ton of client interviews for the past, I don't know, few years. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to make this into a podcast, and I'm going to interview clients and ask them specific questions about what they're looking for, because I think that you and I and other people that are maybe on your podcast and other podcasts that we know and love, a lot of us are therapists that are in the field, in the mental health community, kind of giving advice to other therapists about like what clients, how to market to them and how to connect with them.
Right.
So I was like, well, how about I give the actual clients a voice and see if they're mirroring what we're saying and seeing if there's like anything different that they're saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's brilliant. It really is. I mean, it's just, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, who would have thunk? Yeah. So,
Right.
I mean, I love it. Yeah, I love it. So, well, tell folks a little bit about what you're learning. I mean, what are you finding out?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a handful of questions that I usually ask some of these clients. And I think right now, us talking, there's kind of like, I think there's might be 6 or 7 episodes out there. There'll be like more every week on Mondays. And one of the first questions I ask them, which I think is really interesting, is how were you first introduced to therapy? Like, how did you learn about therapy as a kid or somebody growing up? And a lot of people, the one that you listened to recently is Jill. And you might have noticed that Jill said that she wanted to find a therapist that was exactly like the one from The Sopranos. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think, which is like pretty. Did you watch The Sopranos?
I've watched some of the episodes. I don't know that I saw any of the episodes with the therapist, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not like, I haven't seen all the episodes either, but I have seen some of the clips with that therapist, and she's just sort of like no bull confrontation, and it's exciting, and it's drama. It like a therapy session on TV should be, so that it's compelling.
Yeah. Kind of like a Dr. Phil.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And then there was another, a later interview was with Candace, and Candace was introduced to the concept of therapy by watching that movie Harold and Maude. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and so she thought that, like, in that movie that, they go to therapy because they're sort of rebels, and so only the rebels go to therapy, and she identified as a rebel. Or another therapist, client, Kathy, said that she learned about therapy through watching Frasier.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So there's like these really like pop culture references.
Yeah.
And they're coming into therapy, maybe possibly thinking that it should be that entertaining or dramatic, or I don't know,
Yeah. Well, it's what's interesting is that at least my sense, and maybe I'm overly biased, but my sense is that people are much less, feel like going to therapy is much less stigmatized than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was almost, and it's almost like now there's almost a message out there that oh, going to therapy is a requirement for people,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Yeah.
hope that, and I think, I would agree with that, but, not everybody feels that way.
Yeah, yeah, and
Uh,
it's a good point because there's a difference between I interviewed a 10-year-old who happens to be my niece,
mhm,
and she talked about her therapy experience, which is really different than somebody like maybe Jill, who's in her mid 30s, almost close to 40, and Jill grew up in Oklahoma,
mhm,
and she thought that like you should only go to therapy if you've been really traumatized, if you've been like raped
mhm,
multiple times or something, or
mhm.
maybe there was like gay conversion therapy or something.
Yeah,
So that was like
yeah.
really Oklahoma 30, 40 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
I don't know
Uh-huh.
what it's like today. But then Tegan, who is my niece and who lives in LA and she's 10 years old, her uncle is a therapist, her grandma is a therapist. Everyone in LA like talks about going to therapy, and her friends talk about going to therapy. So it's like really
Mhm.
into the culture. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah, yeah. And it's I think part of the stigma, and where I'm located, I love where I live, and I'm not disking the people here
Hmm.
at all, but it's really an ultra conservative kind of area, and so my sense is that going to therapy is something that you do in secret and nobody knows it,
Right.
and it's kind of like you're almost like you're sneaking into a massage parlor or something,
Hmm. Hmm.
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
There's
mean, it's just kind of
stigma.
the stigma. And so it's refreshing to know that stigma, my sense is that it's changing. And I think it's because really the changes in the way that we are marketing our
Hmm.
practices and the way that we're putting ourselves out there and really connecting with people,
Hmm.
on that emotional level.
Right. Yeah. And even in asking some of these clients about their childhood experiences or the messages that they picked up, this one client, Joe Lynn, on the podcast was saying that she visited her grandmother in the hospital every month, who had a lobotomy. And so, like, the first thing that she sort of experienced was visiting, like, when it came to like mental health related stuff, was that her grandma got a lobotomy, and she thought that's what like therapy was,
All right.
which is just
Yeah.
really intense. And then there's another client that I talked to, Jake, and Jake is gay, and his family at like a young age they thought that he was too feminine, and so
Mhm.
they were like trying to find therapists to go to that were really masculine men, and they got him like a big brother that was like a masculine
Mhm.
guy, and he's just like, no, no, I don't want this. And he grew up being like, I don't want male therapists, so there's all these like really
Mhm.
important childhood experiences that now I ask my actual clients when they come in for
Yeah.
a session, like,
Yeah.
what was that for you? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So how is so far? How has have these interviews changed your approach in the therapy sessions that you do, and also in just thinking about marketing and all of that? So what is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I think some of the things that like a lot of the clients that I ask them and that they're talking about in the podcast is like these ruptures that happen with a therapist, the ruptures in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so in my own therapy, when I'm being a therapist, I'm a lot more conscious of that, because you know um, Jill, you might have listened to,
Mm-hmm.
who you listened to, she said that like when the therapist that she was seeing pulled out the DSM and was like, let's see what we can diagnose you with, that was just like automatic turn off. And I don't think that
Yeah.
that therapist obviously meant to turn her off. She thought she was being helpful. Like, let's bring out this book of diagnoses and figure
Mm-hmm.
out what your label is or issue is.
Mm-hmm.
But Jill just ended therapy. Like
Yeah.
she didn't really even give the therapist a chance
Mm-hmm.
to repair that rupture.
Yeah.
And so, and there's another client, Jess, and then this other client on the podcast where they talk about how they they were seeing their therapist, and then in the middle of the seeing their therapist, they found another they developed a romantic relationship with somebody that they were seeing.
Mm-hmm.
they felt so judged by the therapist. Like
Mm.
one of the clients like started to date a younger man, and she felt really judged by the therapist, thinking that was really wrong. Another one was Jess was saying that she decided to like open up her relationship and become like poly, and the therapist was really upset by that and trying to tell
Mhm.
her like about all the issues about why that's not a good idea. And when I asked them like, oh, did you tell the therapist that like that hurt your feelings or you don't like what they said no.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh God, like I feel like sorry for them that they didn't speak up. I feel like empathy for the therapist because I'm sure that's happened, and that's why some of my sessions or clients have ended because of something that I did or said inadvertently, just because I was
Mhm.
caring or I was protective of them, and then all of a sudden they just stopped seeing me. So that's
Right.
really woken me up a bit.
Right. Right. Well, it's in my own style of doing therapy, I think most of the time I will say to clients, if this is ever gets to a place where it's not working for you, please let me know,
Hmm.
and let's talk about that. And my feelings are not going to be hurt by that,
Hmm.
because it's you've got to find the right fit with a therapist. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I say that too. And now I'm like checking in even more often with
Hmm.
the clients to make sure that they know that they can bring up anything with me.
Hmm.
Um, there was another thing on one last thing on this topic
Yeah.
where um, Jolynn, a client that I talked to on the podcast, she was seeing her therapist for a few years. And then the therapist recommended that she go to group therapy. And that therapist was also running the group. So she went from individual therapy with that therapist to group therapy with that therapist. And I'm going to actually read what she said. I quote.
Okay.
Yeah, she said about that experience, I immediately felt like maybe she liked other people in the group more than me. It brought up a lot of chatter in my mind about not being first and not getting that individual attention. So I watched myself do or say things in the group to get her to pay more attention to me. And I was like, am I 30 or am I 3 years old? And
Mm.
so she was like really struggling with like sharing her therapist with all these other people in the group. And she was mad at her therapist. She felt like she wasn't getting enough attention. She was acting out like a 3-year-old. And the individual therapist, didn't really know this for a while. So that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So that it's um, it sounds like to me that a lot of times people, even if they're not getting what they need from the therapist, they try to be polite,
Hmm.
and not hurt the. It's almost
Yeah.
like they're showing concern for the therapist in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I always like, I know that when I go to therapy and I see a therapist, I know that it's about me and I'm not like thinking too much about that therapist. And I want to create that environment for my clients too. But I don't
Mhm.
think they really get it as much as like us therapists that like really know how therapy works or how it should work or something. So
Right.
these are all good reminders. But there are other things that I ask
Uh-huh.
clients about that like could help us with marketing and connecting and building trust with the clients.
Hmm.
Um, Jill also said, Jill has a background in marketing. And so she talks to other businesses and companies about what their brand value is, like what their mission statements are, really trying to dig into their values to figure out. And a therapist that's like connected with her really well was able to ask Jill, like, so, we're going to talk about what your values are and we're going to figure out what you care about. And that was just like so touching to her. She's like,
Uh-huh.
and exciting, like, oh, yay, I get to talk about my values. I've been talking about other people's values all the time. Another person on the podcast said that she wanted her therapist to not be married, to have no kids, and
Uh-huh.
to be older than her. Like those were like
Oh, wow.
the three most important. So when she first called that therapist, she's like, I got 3 questions for you. Da da da
Uh,
da. And she answered
uh-huh.
them correctly, I guess, according to
Uh-huh.
her. Um, And then there was Tegan, the 10-year-old, and she just wanted to feel like she could ask her therapist anything. She went to therapy at first. She was sort of ambushed after like summer camp by her mom, my sister, and she was like put into therapy with my sister's therapist. And she was like, I don't like this guy. And she said that like what she didn't like about this guy was that he was weirdly calm. I thought was really interesting because like I think as therapists, we're just calm. We try to like be calm and understanding. And she was really put off by that.
Right.
So she wanted a therapist, this little 10-year-old girl who was just like another therapist who was like chatty and asking her about all the stuff, and that Tegan could ask her about anything that she wanted. So I was starting to get like a lot of feedback, as you might suspect, and as like other people say, is that like they want their therapist to be authentic. Yeah. They want their therapist to be like open and maybe give more self-disclosure than we're trained to, or maybe even feel comfortable with. I mean, obviously it's up to you if you want to self-disclose. But a lot of clients are seeking that, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I think we had talked about that before, I think on the previous episode of the podcast that you did with me, just the importance of self-disclosure for a lot of therapists. And that's something that I've kind of figured out maybe just by accident, is that when you start to self-disclose, and Brene Brown writes about this, the way you empower people is giving them a way to be vulnerable. And I think if we can model that vulnerability to some degree, I think it helps clients connect in a therapeutic way.
Yeah, it really does. And it just seems like it's becoming like more expected by our clients that we will do some more self-disclosure. So I feel like that's something that we're all kind of thinking about and struggling with a little bit. And on like the Therapy Den profiles, when you sign up for a profile, I'm trying to sort of gently encourage therapists to be more open with who they really are and their values and beliefs. Right. Because I know that it works. I know that it gets people through the door, and that's what they want to hear. Right. I also, in the podcast, I asked specifically to the clients, do you have any advice for therapists when it comes to marketing their practice or being a better therapist for you in session? And it's really interesting what they say. Jill ended up saying that she wants therapists to, when they write their profiles or when they write their website, to sort of like write it use no jargon and write it at like an 8th grade reading level, which I think is something that we've heard. And so she's sort of like echoing that. No jargon, really simple, easy to understand language. Jake, he said that he wants a therapist to be authentic, but he also wants the therapist to have a good style.
Interesting. Yeah.
So he's thinks a lot about what he wears and what his style is, and he decorating his home and everything. So he wants a therapist to think about, I don't know what this is going to do for marketing, but he wants a therapist to dress, think about what they're putting on. And then when he walks into the office, he wants that office to be have some good interior design, and then he feels really comfortable and he can trust that therapist.
Right. I had it sounds like you and I do therapy in kind of a similar way. One of the questions when I do my first session with people is I ask them if they've had any experience with coming to see a therapist or whatever. And I ask them, was that a good experience or not? And what made it, if it's not, what made it not so good? And I remember one client telling me, he says, well, yeah, I went to see this therapist one time, and her office was so messy, and she had papers stacked up everywhere, and she was just unorganized, and I just didn't have that much confidence in her for those reasons. It might have been she was a brilliant therapist, but the atmosphere that people were walking into just threw people off. So I think that really speaks to what you're talking about, the style, and that being important.
Yeah, exactly. Another person said that, like, I have anxiety and I have OCD. So I need to know on their website or the therapist profile, how do I get into the office? How many staircases are there? Where are the bathrooms? What do I do when I get to the waiting room?
Right.
And they're just like, they're so nervous about going to therapy that they need to know everything listed about like what they need to do before they actually like go into the office.
Right.
Where do I park? Do I have to pay for parking? All of this stuff was really, really important. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting.
Right. Yeah.
Another person on the podcast, Kathy, she said that she doesn't want her therapist to ask her, like, she doesn't want her therapist to sound cliche. So she doesn't want her therapist to say, how do you feel about that?
Yeah.
That just like takes her out of the moment.
Yeah.
And that, which is tricky because there's probably some like invisible landmines.
Yeah.
That we don't know with her.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm not sure what to do about that.
Yeah.
Another client said that when she looks through therapist profile pictures, she was really turned off by the majority of therapist profile pictures because these are her words. They all had dead eyes.
Interesting.
She was saying like that they looked like they had dead eyes because they're vacant inside. Like there was no personality coming through the photo.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just sort of like a nice little photo, whatever, but like, who is this person and what's going on? So she felt like it was just like a little too empty.
Yeah.
Jolynn, this other client, she said that she wants to know up front that her therapist that she's going to has also gone to therapy and is continuing to go to therapy.
Right.
So maybe even like putting that on the website because she felt like she has so much trauma, and she did have a lot of trauma. She's like went through a ton of stuff. So she wanted to know that her therapist had also done a lot of work on themselves. And that, what'd she say? She said she wanted to know that the therapist would be emotionally available to her in an effortless way.
Wow.
So she figured that if the therapist went to therapy, then she would be able to provide that for her.
Wow. Yeah. And that's that really I forget the book. I probably got it on the shelf here. It's more of a clinical book, and I'll try to put a link to this in the show notes. But it's just called Common Factors in Family Therapy, and it's the subtitles The Overlooked Foundation for Effective Practice. And the crux of it is that therapist-client relationship. We know that, we've been taught that, but really, if a person just simply develops a genuine relationship with the client, that is therapeutic. And I guess that's really kind of the big take-home that I got from this book. It's been a while since I read it, but yeah, and what it sounds like what you're hearing from people all the time, Jeff, is exactly that, is that they want us to be real and not superficial.
Yeah, they want us to be real. They want us to be authentic. But sometimes they have these little tests. They test us, and we don't know when they're testing us. There was another person who's was looking for a therapist that specialized in health at every size. And she identifies herself as being fat. And so she calls herself fat, and she is totally fine with using that term. And it was important for her to find a therapist that also was okay with calling her body fat. And if they like stumbled over it or were a little weird about saying it or felt like it was too offensive, then she was like, nope, not for me.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I'm learning, is that there's like these little tests that they put us through that we don't even know about.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. Wow, this is just fascinating stuff, Jeff. And I just, this whole idea. How did you come up? You might have mentioned this a little bit. How did you come up with the idea for doing the podcast in this way?
Yeah, it was from I I feel like I can get just like so bogged down in what I think is the most important thing for clients to know when they're looking for a therapist. Building these therapist directories, I'm just like, all right,
Hmm.
this is exactly what they should know. But then I
Hmm.
kept on getting feedback from people that were visiting the site or clients that I was interviewing that that's not actually what they want to know. So it's like, ugh, if
Hmm.
I'm confused and I feel like I'm an expert in this and I've been doing this for like 10 years, then I wonder if other therapists might need to know this information just straight from the client's mouth,
Right.
So there's that. And then like another reason is that, I hope therapists listen to it and get a lot from it, but I also hope that non-therapists listen to it and they can just like, regular people who
Yeah.
maybe haven't gone to therapy or didn't know that they could actually like ask therapists questions or
Yeah.
they could shop around for therapists or so I want to like open up people's eyes to like all the different types of therapists out there. And
Right.
so those were a couple major
Yeah.
reasons I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love the idea, and like I said before, I love what you're doing with just Therapy Den, and just really bringing a lot of heart to what we do in our profession, and I so appreciate that. Um,
Hmm.
so tell folks. I want to be respectful of your time, but tell folks a little bit more about Therapy Den
Hmm.
um, and why they should sign up for it.
Sure, I would love to.
Mhm.
Thanks. Well, I think Therapy Den is a beautiful site with a really good user experience, easy to navigate. If therapists sign up for it now, they automatically get 6 months free. And it's something, for example, I don't want to be like too negative and I have to like watch out for what I say sometimes, but
Mhm.
just for example, if you go to like the Psychology Today therapist directory, if somebody wants to filter for a therapist that is male or female, they can do that, but they can't filter for a therapist that's transgender or non-binary. And so Therapy Den like gives them that option to do that. That's just
Right.
one of like the many, many examples. So I'm trying to,
Mhm.
with Therapy Den, like move our industry forward so that
Mhm.
we're like more inclusive and more progressive. Um, and if you sign up, then you can choose to either pay $20 a month or $30 a month after the 6 month promo. 10% of your monthly fee will go to an organization of your choice. That,
Oh
oh,
wow. Mhm.
one of, well, sorry, no, one of 5 organizations that you can
Okay.
choose from.
Okay.
And those are Planned Parenthood, the Trevor Project, Mercy Corps, Life After Hate, and the ACLU. So some of your, monthly fee will go to those organizations.
Right.
So we're just trying to give back, and I like how you describe the project that I'm working on as like I'm doing it with heart because it really does feel that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great, Jeff. I'm so glad you joined me again for the podcast, and I'm sure we'll do it again and again. It's just
Yeah, I hope we do.
fun to yeah to talk about this stuff. So tell folks how to get in touch with you and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So you can, if you want to just send me an email, you can send me an email at hello@therapydone.com. If you want to listen to the podcast that I've been talking about this whole time, you can go to you can look up, Say More About That. You'll find it anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Say More About That. You can go to therapydone.com to sign up for a profile. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
great. And we'll have all this in the show notes and such. And so that's going to be a good thing. The
Yeah.
other thing too is Jeff did a guest blog on
Hmm.
for the practice of therapy, and so I would invite you to go over and take a look at that. And I want to tell you the name of it real quick. Let me pull it up here real quickly. And it's getting your private practice directory listings noticed. And it's a great article that Jeff did just about when you're writing for your directories and whichever ones you go into,
Hmm.
how should you go about doing that and how it should be worded. And it's a great resource there.
Thanks. Yeah, I give a lot of. There's also a video I think at the bottom of
yes there is.
I'm just like, all right, let's go for it. It's a 50-minute video of me going, through each segment on your Psychology Today or Good Therapy or Therapy Done profile about like the types of things that you should write and how you can connect with the clients. So I had a lot of fun making that.
Oh yeah, it's a great resource, and thanks for putting that out there.
Sure.
Okay. Well, Jeff, again, thanks for being on the podcast, and we'll do this again here soon.
Can't wait. Talk to you later.
Thanks. Well, don't you just love Jeff? He is such a great guy, and I really enjoy talking with him. And I know just from the times that I've interacted with Jeff that he and I tend to think a lot alike and probably do therapy in much the same style. And I think he just reiterates, as I said there towards the end, the importance of just being real with our clients and being genuine. That's what people want. That's why they come to you, because they connect with you. And so I think that's so important to convey that not only in the therapy room, but also in our marketing and being able to put ourselves out there and be vulnerable. And that's what attracts people, is they want to know that you're genuine. So keep that in mind. I hope this has been a great episode for you, and I would encourage you to go and listen to Jeff's podcast. I'm probably going to binge listen to the podcast this weekend when I'm out in the yard doing my yard work and just hearing what clients are saying about us as therapists. And it's going to be, I think we can learn so much from that. And I'm so thankful to Jeff for being able to put his podcast together and putting that out there for us all. Do take a look at our show sponsor for today, Brighter Vision, and you can find them at practiceoftherapy.com/Brighter Vision. They are the premier provider of websites for therapists, and they have such beautiful websites, and they'll spend the time with you that you need in order to get the website that represents who you are. And also just a quick last note, do check out both the courses I have up. If you go to practiceoftherapy.com and just right there at the top of the page, there's a button that says to find out about the courses, to take the courses. So I commend that to you as well. So folks, I hope you're having a great week or weekend whenever you might be listening to this, and we'll talk with you next time. Thanks again for joining me on the podcast. Been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.